One of the major tools that we'll use in economics is what we call a model. It's a diagram or a graph, those are fine words for it, but it is important to understand that we see it as a model, meaning that it models some sort of human behavior. Oftentimes people go, well, why use models in economics? Why not just teach us what we need to know? Why do we have to draw these funny diagrams? Well, the reason for that is oftentimes in economics we're studying something that is very complex. We're studying society and people. And we expect people to respond to incentives in a certain way. That is, typically, if I offer somebody, for example, if I offer to pay somebody more money, I would expect them to maybe work harder. Or if I lower the price of an item, I would expect people to buy more of it. But people are kind of funny, people are kind of tricky, and sometimes they don't do exactly what we think they're going to. So, what a model hopes to show is what we expect to happen in most of the cases. There's always going to be exceptions. It's a social studies class, so there's always exceptions. And oftentimes, it's the exceptions that are the interesting parts of what we study. So, a model is hopefully going to simplify and show us what should happen in a given situation, and from that we can extract an economic principle or economic theory. They also help us in our analysis. They help us to clearly explain what it is that we're trying to say. We can point to a model and say, if this happens and this happens, we should see this result. And that just helps us to get across or show or demonstrate our understanding of an economic principle or idea. Let's start off with an idea that we started with in the last video. Let's think about if a country, if they had all of their factors of production, all of their land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. If they were to devote all of that to making just one thing, let's say they're going to make cars. In our example, if they devoted all of their factors of production to making cars, they could make 10 cars per day. Or, if instead they devoted all of their factors of production to making cheese, they could make 100 kilograms or sticks or blocks of cheese per day. Remember, our underlying principle here is scarcity. They won't be able to produce 10 cars and 100 blocks of cheese a day because, well, that's what scarcity is. So, that leads us to this idea of if we're going to choose, we want to make some cars and some cheese, how do we decide how much of each one we're going to make? If you talk to your parents or an older brother or sister, someone who's taken economics and has long since forgotten it, one of the few ideas I bet they do remember is this idea of opportunity cost. It's one of the key things that we look at in economics to try to understand why people make the choices that they do make. Well, the definition of opportunity cost, what it is, it's what you give up when you have to make a choice. So, if I chose to make 10 cars, I would give up the ability to make 100 cheese. Or, if I chose to make 100 cheeses, I would give up the ability to make 10 cars. As a student, we talked about this early on, if you choose to study, it's going to take away from your ability to hang out with your friends. If you choose to sleep more, it's going to take away from your ability to study. These are the important decisions that we look at and investigate in an economics class. Well, what if we don't want to make just 10 cars or 100 cheese? What if we want kind of a mixture of both? If we want a mixture of both, then we need to figure out what one unit of each one is going to cost. So what does one car cost in terms of cheese? And what does one cheese cost in terms of cars? To do that, it's really simple math. We just set up a ratio of cars to cheese, 10 to 100, and we reduce each one to 1. So to get 10 down to 1, we divide by 10, and we divide 100 by 10. So one car costs us 10 kilograms of cheese. Or, if I want to know how many cars producing 1 kilogram of cheese costs, again, I take 100 and divide it by 100 to get 1, and I divide 10 by 100, and I get 0.1 or 1/10. Now obviously we see 1 over 10, which is another way to express 1/10, so I probably didn't need to do that second step, but you always can if the math isn't very comfortable for you. So knowing the opportunity cost helps us make choices. If I'm a country and I've got all the cars I need, but I don't have any cheese, well then I can go, okay, well each time I produce 1 cheese, I give up exactly 0.1 cars. So it makes us a more informed person when we make our choices. Now keep in mind, this is a learning exercise. Obviously, countries make many more products than two, and no country could say, or no business or person could say beyond the shadow of a doubt, here's my exact opportunity cost. But we do think about it as we make our choices throughout a day. If I've been studying for 2 or 3 hours, and I think, okay, well, what am I going to get out of studying for another hour or another 20 minutes? It's important to know, okay, I'm going to give up exactly this much time with my friends, but maybe I'm not going to gain very much more through studying because I've already studied enough, a couple of hours. We take that idea of opportunity cost and we express it on what's going to be our first model, the production possibilities curve. Some teachers or books refer to it as the production possibilities frontier. Either one's fine, whichever one you're comfortable with. Most of the time, because we like abbreviations in economics, we'll go ahead and call it the PPC or the PPF, if you prefer that term. We're going to take the same numbers we had on the previous slide and go ahead and look at them this way. So if I made 100 blocks of cheese, that meant all of my resources were making cheese, therefore I could make 0 cars. We see that here, and we see it down here at point B. So 100 cheese equals 0 cars. Or, at the other end of that, if I wanted to make only cars, I could make 10 cars and 0 cheese. And we see that at point A there. And then we can fill in everything in between by remembering what the opportunity cost was. So, previously we said that every time I make 1 car, I give up the ability to make 10 blocks of cheese. So, if I'm making 1 car, that means I can't make 10 of those kilograms of cheese. Therefore, at most, I can make 90. If I'm going to make 2, then I've given up the ability to make 2 times 10. So this is going to be 80. And obviously, we can see that this is just going to descend by 10 all the way through. So as this is happening, what we can say is that the opportunity cost in this example, the opportunity cost is constant. That means the opportunity cost is not changing as I make 1, 2, 3 all the way to 10 cars. It stays the same, it's 10. The next video you're going to see, we're going to make opportunity cost variable, and that's an important concept to get in mind too, but this is the basic way of looking at it. So what we see here is 4 points, A, B, C, and D. So at point C here, we can see that we're making 8 cars, therefore, we're only able to produce 20 kilograms of cheese. Here at point D, we're making 3 cars, so we're only able to make 70 kilograms of cheese. Well, there's some other things that could occur though. Let's start off and look at point E first. Point E, we notice, is inside, it's closer to our axes, so it's inside of the production possibilities curve. Well, if that's true, so let's say that I'm making 3 cars and 20 kilograms of cheese. Well, that doesn't show up anywhere on our table here, but of course it's a possibility. Well, what that means at point E is we're not making efficient use of our resources. That is, if I were going to make 3 cars, I could make up to 70 kilograms of cheese, but here I'm making only 20. So some of our factors of production, land, labor, capital, or entrepreneurship, are being employed in a bad way. They're not being used, people are being lazy, our machines are broken down, something like that. Point F, where I have 8 cars and 70 blocks of cheese, well, that would seem to be the best one. It would get rid of some more of that scarcity. Unfortunately, it's not possible with our given amount of factors of production. So to get there, to get 8 and 70, I would have to get more land, more labor, more capital, or more entrepreneurship. Keep in mind that when we go back to our initial idea of scarcity, that scarcity, of course, is going to be made worse if I'm not using my factors of production efficiently. So we're not saying that any country could actually ever be at A, B, C, or D, but it is the goal of a country to get as close. What we want to see is the most efficient use of our factors of production and get as close to producing on the PPC as possible. That's going to make the problem of scarcity the least problematic that it could be. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments below.